Hey brewers, welcome back to BKA Brewing. Today I'm going to show you how to brew an XPA. So to brew this XPA, we're going to use the Woolworths Lager extract tin and USO5 yeast, not using the tin yeast today. We're going to use 500 grams of the Wheat Malt liquid extract. Going to use 500 grams of dextrose, so pure sugar, just to bump up that ABV slightly. 250 grams of the light dry malt extract, 250 grams of maltodextrin for the body and head retention, and we're actually going to use 150 grams of Vienna grain. So we're going to steep this in a couple of litres of water for about 30 minutes. And that'll help extract a lot of the flavours from the grain and also a lot of the colours. So it'll slightly change the colour of our brew, which hopefully will pair well with the wheat extract that we're going to use today. Hop wise, we're going to use Centennial, Amarillo and Citra. So we'll go with a hot tea to start off with. So we'll go 15 grams of Centennial, 15 grams of Amarillo and 10 grams of Citra. We'll have that sitting in the hot tea at about 80 degrees for about 20 minutes. Dry hop wise, we'll do that on about day 3, so hopefully still during the active fermentation. We'll go 40 grams of Citra, 20 grams of Amarillo and 20 grams of Centennial. Equipment wise today, we're just going back to absolute basics, no pressure fermenting today, just to show everyone that it can still be done. So we're going to use the bucket or the pail fermenter with an airlock in the top. Volume wise, we're going to do about 23 litres, so that should be enough to fill the 19 litre keg, and then hopefully a bottle or two at the end of that as well. So first we're going to start off with steeping the Vienna grain. So I have the grain itself, I have an old pot from the kitchen, and I also have like a paint strainer bag from Bunnings, which I typically pour my grain into to steep in the water. So I've just boiled 2 litres on the jug, so I'm just going to pour that in to this pot here. Alright, so I'm just going to grab this paint strainer bag and drop it straight in there. Just open that up a smidge. Then I'm going to grab this grain and I'm just going to very carefully pour that in there. So I don't want to spill any of that. Alright, now that's in there. Just going to swoosh it around in the water a little bit just to make sure that all of the bits of grain have come into contact with the water. And then I'm just going to let that sit there and steep for the next 30 minutes. Alright, so I've already got sanitizer in this fermenter. So I'm just going to swoosh it around, get it right up on the edges. I'm just going to put the lid back on that, shake that around, make sure it gets all the way up to the lid. Alright, so I'm going to take that lid off, sanitize this spoon, make sure that it's okay, good to go. Alright, now I'm going to sit that down on top of each other. This is my hop sock, so I'm just going to sanitize that as well for a little bit later on. Alright, so I'm just going to fill the bucket up with a couple of litres of water just to get it started. I've already tipped out the sanitizer. So now it's time to put the extract tin, the contents of it anyway, into the bucket. So I will grab my tin opener, my can opener, spray it with some sanitizer. And I just want to spray around the top of the can as well with some sanitizer. Alright, so put that on. Open the can up. Alright, that is now off. Alright, so we've got all the gooey wort inside that can. I'm going to pick that can up and pour that straight into the fermenter. I'm just going to let that pour for a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to grab my spoon, just going to give it another spray just in case. And scrape the rest of this can out into the fermenter. Now what I did forget to mention is I actually had this can sitting in a bowl of boiling hot water just while I was preparing and setting everything up, which just allowed all of the water inside this can just to free up and become slightly less gooey, which has just made it easier to pour the contents of the can into the fermenter. Alright, so we're currently sitting just over 3 litres, so I'm going to top this up to about 5. So we're just giving that a nice stir here, just to mix that up with the water that we've just put in. Right, so the next thing that will get underway is the hop tea. I have my measuring cup here, and I'm just going to put just short of 2 cups in there to start with. Going to grab my sanitized hop sock, just pop that in the water, and then pour those hops right in that sock. Tie that off, and then away we go. Right, so just drop that in there, and then top that up with a bit more water. Alright, and then we're going to set that aside for, what to say, 15 minutes, and that will form our hop tea. Alright, in next is the wheat liquid extract. I've already weighed out 500 grams of this and put it into a container, so we'll just tip that straight in there as well. And I'm going to have to use my spoon just to help me pull that out of this container. And what I will do is I'll grab the rest of the hot water that I had from the hot tea. I'll stick it in this to try and get any more extract out of this jar that I can. Alright, that'll do. So now that the malt wheat extract is in there, we just want to give that a big stir as well. Alright, the 15 minutes are up. The hop tea is done. So we've just dropped the hop tea into the fermenter. Again, give that a stir. And yes, I did throw the entire bag or hop sock into the fermenter. No harm in doing so. I feel as though it just adds a little bit more aroma to the finished beer. Alright, so the steeped grains are now done as well. So I'm just simply going to pour those straight into the fermenter as well. We're still sitting at about 6 or 7 litres. The reason why I'm doing this is because the liquid in the bottom is still quite warm, which means that when we do go in and add in the light malt, the dextrose and the maltodextrin, they should dissolve a little bit easier and we should get not as many clumps to mix up because the liquid is still a little bit warm. Alright, so with this bag, I'm just going to wrap up the top and just let what's left in there just drain. Alright, now that that's finished draining, we're just going to pour this straight into the fermenter. Give that a bit more of a stir. Now let me just say, it smells amazing in here after smelling those steeped grains and the hop tea. I'm very, very excited for this beer to be finished so I can taste it. Alright, anyway, so we will add in all of the sugars now. Alright, in we pour. Now I do want to do it slowly just to avoid all of that turning into a big dust cloud, which has unfortunately happened slightly. Again, use what water I have left just to pour into this container. Shake that around a little bit, pour that in there, just to make sure that we are not wasting any of our sugars. Now that that's all in there, just going to give my hands a quick sanitize. And I'm going to get away stirring to ensure that all of these sugars in here are dissolved and we're not left with any clumps, because the yeast can struggle to break down those clumps. See, these are the clumps here that I'm referring to, like we wanted to avoid that. So I'll just make sure that I continue to stir this and then fill it up with another 10 litres of water just to try and get those to dissolve nicely. Okay, so the beer is currently sitting at 30 degrees. It's now nice and stirred in. We haven't really got any big clumps left. Unfortunately with the yeast, I can't pitch that at 30 degrees without risking some off flavours. So what I'm actually going to do, just finish sanitising the rest of this again. I actually came prepared and I have a big jug of cold water. So I'm going to put some cold water in the brew to hopefully get that temp down. So I'm aiming for like sub 24, 25 degrees. Preferably closer to as 20 as I can get. Okay, so we've just hit 23 litres. I'll just make sure that that is all mixed together. Just getting right down the bottom and the edges, just to make sure that there's nothing left sitting on the side that hasn't been mixed in yet. And as you can see there, we have no clumps. Oh, one tiny little one, excuse me. We barely have any clumps left. I will just finish breaking that one up against the side. This is probably now ready for the yeast. So before I pitch the yeast, I just want to do a hydrometer reading just to get the starting gravity of this brew. So first, I will completely sanitize the hydrometer just to make sure that there's no bacteria on there, because I'm actually going to drop it straight in the bucket. Right, so we're just going to drop that sanitized hydrometer right in the middle. And then we'll just wait until that stops moving to hopefully get a decent reading on the starting gravity. So it looks to be over 1040 at the moment. It looks to be about 1046 to 1048. Somewhere in that range.
We'll go with 1046.
Right, so we've confirmed the starting gravity is 1046. I'm also going to use the pill. So I'm going to sanitize that completely. Shake that off. Sanitize it again. Never be too safe. Alright, I'm going to drop that straight in there. I'll set that up, calibrate it on the app, just to validate the starting gravity, the temperature, which I believe at the moment is 22 degrees, but the pill will also confirm that. And then we'll pitch the yeast. I was so close. Starting gravity on the pill is 1049, so only 3 gravity points off. Anyway, that's good enough for me. Alright, so we'll pitch the yeast. So just make sure we need to sanitize the whole outside of the yeast packet. Sanitize the scissors that we're going to use to cut open the packet. Alright, so just trim the top off that. And then we'll pour those little yeasties straight in the bucket. So the temp is about 22, 23. So that's perfect to pitch this yeast into. So just sprinkling it around the top. I was trying not to get any stuck on the pill. Just making sure I can get everything out of that packet that I can. So now the yeast's in there. The only thing left to do is put the lid on. So I'll just finish sanitizing the top of the lid. We will push that on. Make sure it is nice and sealed until we hear that click. Now that the lid is sealed on the fermenter, I'll whack this in the chest freezer. I'll set the temperature to 20 degrees to start off with. Once the fermenter is in the chest freezer, I will then fill the airlock up with sanitizer and push it through the top. The reason why I do that after I put the fermenter into the chest freezer is during movement, so when I'm carrying this fermenter around, the sanitizer can make its way down through the valve at the bottom directly into the beer. So We're only using sanitizer, not water, but I don't want to go dropping any excess sanitizer into the beer and potentially affecting that final taste.
All right, so I'll just push that airlock in there like that, making sure it is nice and tight and there's no chance of any oxygen getting in there. We'll close that up and then start fermenting.